Hey everyone, and welcome back to Gotcha Interact. In today's video, we're going to be looking at Ororon because he's going to be one of the new 4-stars on Chaska's and Lenny's banner as well. So let's look at his kit, kind of go over that, and also give you guys our personal thoughts on maybe his value, how good he might be, and maybe some teams he can fit in, and maybe even his future placements as well. So diving right in, looking straight at Ororon, he does ascend into attack percent, and this is because he kind of is a damage-focused character. After we've kind of looked over his kit a little bit, he wants to deal damage as an off-fielder in the most basic form. Moving forward though, let's look at his skills and his burst. His normal attack is pretty basic. It's just, he is a bow character. He has a normal charged attack that just does electro damage, and that's about it, you know, just the basic bow character type thing. But looking right into his skill, he's going to throw out what's called a spirit orb when you use the skill, and it's going to deal electro damage. That's also Night Soul aligned because he is a Natlan character. Now, this spirit orb will bounce between 3 other opponents, so it kind of reminds me a lot of Sejuin, just because Sejuin's skill does the same thing, and that, you know, it bounces between opponents and then also heals your characters. The only difference with that is she actually heals. Ororon's dealing a lot more damage focus in his skill here, bouncing between opponents, a lot of electro application that way as well. If you look at his skill and specifically the multipliers at level 10, or assuming you have it crowned. Well, since he's a 4-star, I'm not going to assume you have the talent crowned. Maybe let's just say at level 8, because that's a little bit more realistic. I mean, that's where I'll be putting him. But we're looking at a damage multiplier of 316.2% for each of these hits that it's going to be bouncing between. So that's a pretty good multiplier, and based on how he scales and how you build him, it has some potential. But Vixen, what can you tell us about his burst, or maybe some other thoughts you had about the skill?
Well, yeah, I think overall with his skill, it's definitely going to be very interesting because the bouncing between targets is going to allow a lot for application. It's going to help even more with his idea and the passives that we'll look at later. But looking at the burst, it states that basically upon immediately using your burst, you're going to deal Night Soul aligned AoE electro damage, summoning forth a supersonic Oculus. The supersonic Oculus states that it will continuously taunt nearby enemies and attract attacks from those enemies. At the same time, it will continuously rotate and fire off sonic waves that deal Night Soul aligned electro damage, most likely in an AoE type way, just because they'll be in a kind of centralized area around as they spin around. So the kind of idea is like 3 prongs, almost like a triangle, 3 different ways of it just hitting damage at kind of the points and just doing a lot of extra damage. It's mainly, I believe, for a lot of application. And in terms of what you were talking about in kind of your idea, if we went down to level 8 with these kind of multipliers, the initial damage hit is going to be 279, basically 280%, so less than what you get in the skill. Keep in mind this is happening more consistently, but that's just the initial damage hit. The consistent sound wave collision damage, or those firing off shockwave or sonic wave damage hits, are going to be 53% at level 8. So although it is lower, he does only have an energy cost of 60, so it does make sense why it is going to be a lower. And the duration is for 9 seconds, with a cooldown of 15 seconds, so a little bit of wait time. Hopefully one of the constellations can fix that. But I do think overall with the burst, it's pretty helpful, and especially with those passes. Once again, that application is going to be extremely helpful for constant electro application, especially if you're using a Hydro character for the type of team to get some of these, you know, interesting ideas we might get in these passes. So speaking of the passives, Rift, what can you tell us about them?
So looking at his first passive, this is kind of his game-changing kind of big idea with how he works. It states that after a nearby party member triggers Night Soul Burst, Auroran will gain 40 Night Soul points, and within 15 seconds after using his elemental skill, when attacks from other party members who are Hydro or Electro hit opponents, Ororon will gain 5 Night Soul points, an effect that can occur every 0.3 seconds for a maximum of 10 times during this 15-second duration. So in short, kind of what that means is your other characters are going to be dealing Hydro or Electro damage, and Ororon's getting some Night Soul points because of that, and he does start off with 40, and he has a maximum of 80. So you're already starting with 40 when another character's triggering a Night Soul burst, which is going to happen without you thinking because, well, Auroran's a Night Soul or a Natlan character. So this is going to happen really easily, and you have 15 seconds after using the skill for this to all build up. So you really don't have to think about this happening because it's just going to happen automatically, especially in an Electro-Charged type team. Additionally, when nearby opponents take Electro-Charged reaction damage or Night Soul aligned damage dealt by other nearby characters, Auroran will consume 10 Night Soul points, provided he has at least that amount. entering his Night Soul's Blessing state and triggering the Hypersense effect. What the Hypersense effect is he's going to deal Night Soul aligned electro damage based on 160% of his attack, that is Ororon, to at most 4 nearby opponents. The aforementioned effect can trigger once every 1.8 seconds. So this sounds really good. As you're dealing Electro-Charged damage, Auroran from off field is going to be dealing, just a lot of attacks about every 1.8 seconds, and he's hitting multiple opponents up to 4. So just constant off-field damage, and that's being added on to his burst also hitting off-field for 9 seconds. His skill kind of bounces between opponents. So he's got a lot of just several different hits going on. So maybe his personal damage numbers aren't going to be like skyrocket high, but he does a lot of different numbers just happening all at once, and just a lot of it. And that kind of goes in the theme with Electro-Charged type of teams. The kind of theme with Electro-Charged is AoE, dealing a lot of damage to just multiple opponents. So he's definitely, hitting a lot of different opponents at the same time. And by just simply throwing a Hydro character in his teams, creating the Electro-Charge reaction, everything's just chaining and all of that. So he does sound like a very fun character. Also, just note that his Night Soul Blessing given from this passive effect only lasts 6 seconds, which isn't terrible. But also note that the Night Soul Blessing is coming from the passive alone that I just read about. It's not coming from the skill directly or the burst directly. It happens basically when you trigger a Night Soul burst with other characters, which once again, you don't have to think about because he's a Natlan character. Chaska is upon us, but with the Pyro Archon looming on the horizon, we are all making sure we have enough Primogems to pull her. Want to give yourself the best shot at bringing Chaska home without overspending? That's where Loot Bar comes in. With Loot Bar, you can top up your account at a discount so you can pick up Chaska and still afford Mavuika. Loot Bar keeps things simple and secure. The only thing they need is your UID and server. No passwords or emails are needed. And for those late night, last minute pulls, Loot Bar offers 24/7 live chat support. It's the backup you need, especially when luck feels like, well, it's not on your side. If you're still on the fence, just check out over 13,000 player reviews praising Loot Bar. Plus, your currency will hit your account in just 30 minutes or less. Other creators use Loot Bar too. Click the link in the description or pinned comment and make the smart choice with Loot Bar. Now, back to the video.
Looking a little bit further beyond that specific passive that kind of gives him his Night Soul actual kind of ability, considering he's a Natlan character, the other passive we have is Aspect Catalyst. Now the interesting about this one, he's an Electro character, so usually with the Electro characters you start to see some sort of energy restoration of some sort. That's kind of the idea with the element. But also here we see some sort of a little bit of a help in a battery possibly situation here as a character. So if you look at his second passive, it states that after the elemental skill that he has with that spirit orb that he has, if it hits an opponent, Auroran will gain the Aspect Sigil effect for 15 seconds. Now what this effect does is it states that when a nearby active party member hits an opponent with normal, charged, or plunging attacks, that specific character will gain 3 energy. If Auroran is off field while this is happening, Auroran will also restore 3 energy. This effect can trigger once every 1 second and can trigger 3 times per duration, which means a maximum of 9 energy per, for the on-field character as well as for Auroran. So never mind the extra energy that you're giving to other characters, but this is actually extremely helpful. I don't know about you, Rift, but that's extremely good. Never mind once again that he has such a low energy cost, but there are a lot of characters that want to focus so much into just other types of, damage, their main damage dealing stat, whether that's HP, defense, attack, whatever that is. Never mind considering they're a damage character. Most likely they'll be worrying about some sort of crit and having a good crit ratio, maybe even some EM. So if they are dependent on their burst, it sometimes gets thrown away and is kind of the last thing to think about when you look at an energy recharge usually. So you start to depend on other characters. And him being some sort of a battery, and we don't have to depend on a quick swap Raiden or Raiden kind of carrying a team again, this is extremely good to see, especially out of a 4-star. So I think this passive is actually just as good as his actual Night Soul Blessing passive.
For sure. It's definitely very good. And certain teams, which I guess we can talk about now. I mean, there's also, obviously, as a Natlan character, he does have that extra passive. And it's pretty cool because while you're in Natlan, you can use his Night Soul state. I'll just read it. It says, while in an area with phlogiston mechanics within Natlan, he can use Night Soul transmission, Ororon. When the active character is currently in the air, the following will trigger when switching to Ororon. So that's kind of cool because you just have to be in the air and you can actually still switch over to him, it looks like. And then he will leap up really high, and that will be his Night Soul transmission. And it'll be triggered once every 10 seconds by your party. So you can hold an aim mode, and it'll cause Auroran to enter the Spirit Speaker state, which will allow him to interact with Night Spirit Graffiti and Night Spirit bodies, extracting information power from them. That's probably going to be in the new area, I'm guessing. The rules for interacting with these objects follow the same rules as those governing Ectomosaurus interactions, which those are just the new Saurians that can fly. Additionally, holding the jump button will cause Auroran to consume 75 stamina and leap. In areas within Natlan where phlogiston mechanics are present, Auroran will prioritize consuming 5 phlogiston to leap to a height higher still. When in the air, Auroran can hold his normal attack to consume phlogiston or stamina and enter aiming mode. So it's kind of cool, and you kind of saw it from the live stream too, just vaguely, just a little bit, not for very long, but he kind of like goes up vertically into the air and he kind of just like sits there and he does some bow attacks or whatever. It looks pretty cool. But I guess let's talk about some teams and some what his best teams might be, but also how can he help some other characters for teams, maybe not best in slot, but just other characters in general. So going back to that passive you just talked about with the energy, I think it's really good. And as a good example, Cyno actually. Cyno's very, very energy hungry. He has a burst cost of 80, and you do want to focus a lot of damage stats on him because he is a DPS, but you have to get his burst back because without his burst, he's not dealing a lot of damage at all. That's just how he works. And so with Auroran being an Electro character, you naturally have the Electro Resonance, but also Auroran giving back energy not only to himself, but also to Cyno. So some kind of Electro-Charged Cyno team might be pretty cool. Of course, Cyno really, really likes to have Dendro characters in his team, no matter really what team he's doing, because he just banks off of that so hard, and it's just how he works. So maybe some kind of Hyper Bloom team that involves using both Auroran and Cyno could be pretty interesting. Now, also keep in mind that Auroran's probably going to be hitting off a lot of the Hyper Blooms and kind of stealing them from Cyno, but as long as he has a moderate amount of Elemental Mastery, maybe that'll be like a specific build on Auroran you do to use with Cyno so that if he is stealing Hyper Bloom, they're still doing moderate damage. But that would be kind of cool team to see just because Auroran's really helping out Cyno in the energy aspect.
Yeah, I think that's Cyno's probably the first character that you kind of get pulled to. I'm thinking of people that don't necessarily have the perfect team in the game or whatever right now, and that's a Neuvillette, a perfect Neuvillette comp. So I'm trying to think of characters like Neuvillette that are really good, and you may not have the exact perfect team or whatever to make it whatever, but I think he's a really good character. Electro-Charged has always stuck to Neuvillette a little bit. Back when if you didn't have his C0, a lot of people have used Beidou. Electro-Charged also works really well with one of his passives. Creating Hydro reactions gets him some extra stacks and gets him more damage in his charge attacks, which obviously you want to do. So overall, I think that that's pretty solid. And so my, I guess, point to that would be, I wouldn't mind seeing Neuvillette being put with Auroran here. And so I think that it's also going to be pretty cool to kind of maybe see that happen. With his amount of Hydro application, the Electro application, be getting plenty of Night Soul points for the Auroran as well. Neuvillette will be taking advantage of the reactions as well, so it's not necessarily a useless mechanic like it kind of is to other characters. Like Electro-Charged isn't really their cup of tea, but with him, he at least can gain, Neuvillette can actually gain something at least from it, so I think that'll be at least somewhat helpful. Also, he's just one of those other characters you don't care too much about. You want to go so heavy into HP and crit that sometimes maybe ER can be an issue. Now, I know a lot of Neuvillettes don't really have too much of an issue, but I think this could make him even maybe just easier to use, and it might be more of a fun team. I was also thinking about one of your other Hydra DPS's Rift, and that was Ayato. I want to kind of maybe see what he could do. I know he's usually stuck to vaporized teams, but I don't know. What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, he obviously is very good for the Vaporized team. He's mostly just given the highlight with like your typical Bennett Xiangling combo with like some kind of viridescent like Kazuha, Sucrose. So, but like he does have really good teams outside of that. A lot of Dendro teams too, as a matter of fact. But Electro-Charged Ayano is actually pretty fun and something I did, a long time ago too, just because it's just really fun. And if you need the AoE, I think that's the biggest selling point here with Ororon and the fact that he's fitting into Electro-Charged teams. It's not to say that all of these Hydro and Electro DPSs that we're looking at, Cloran, Mualani, Ayato, Cyno, Novelet, etc., it's not to say that their best teams are going to involve Ororon. It's just, in my opinion, kind of adding another option to go about making a cool team that's Electro-Charged focused, because if your account is suffering in AoE, like let's say you don't have Novelet, because obviously Novelet is like the AoE king already, but if you are kind of struggling for AoE, I feel like making an Electro-Charged team by just throwing Auroran in with one of your Hydro DPSs or one of your Electro DPSs can allow the team to kind of cover more AoE if you just, you just need that for the current Abyss or something, and you just need to hit both because you're not able to get the damage out to all and spread out, because sometimes that can be an issue, especially if you're just having trouble gathering the enemies based on your positioning and whatnot. So Ayato Electro-Charged typically works really well just because of that. He already kind of has a nice cone of AoE right in front of him. Pretty fun. I can see Cloran using that possibly, and so once again, I don't think a lot of the best in slot teams are going to be overtaken just because of Ororon's existence. It's just simply adding another weapon to the arsenal and kind of to play around with. Because I think obviously with like Raiden, for example, we know that Raiden and also Cyno, won't forget him, have an Electro-Charged resistance built into their kit. So that would be kind of fun to just be able to take advantage of. It's like, hey, they have it, so hey, I can use it. So we already talked about Cyno. I think Raiden can use that as well too. But obviously I think Cyno and Raiden both have their better teams. Like Raiden's going to favor using a 4-star like Chevreuse still more than Ororon, just because the overload team that Raiden does is probably just more powerful. Also, Ororon's once again focused as a damage dealer himself. He's not restrictive like Chevreuse, but Chevreuse is also giving a massive buff. Ororon's not actually giving a massive buff to the teams he's placed in. He's just kind of creating a cool niche type team where he's also contributing to the total damage. So I think like a character like Mualani is probably not going to use him very well just because she hits very slow and she's more focused on wanting to vaporize. There's a huge damage loss, I think, if you're not vaporizing with Mualani. But these other characters that hit very consistently, fast, and just kind of over a period of time, like Ayato, Nevelet, Clorand, Cyno, Raiden, characters like that can really use Ororon and just kind of add just a fun factor to using a different team.
I think there's a lot that we're going to see with Auroran, and I'm excited to kind of see how people play him, especially I know constellations and whatnot are going to be a big thing. So I think overall we're going to see hopefully some good teams, some fun teams. Like you said, I think he's going to be more or less one of those characters that people play and they play for fun, and he'll at least have some help and some usability in some other teams with some other characters, although he is damage focused. So we'll see kind of what he can bring to the table. Also, don't forget, I'm not really sure what set he's really going to be put on. So could he be on Obsidian Codex for personal damage? Or because he really just goes so heavy into attack, is it better to just throw him on a bunch of attack and then just put him on the other set? And if that's the case, then he might be able to get some damage bonus to some other characters. Right. I don't know. We'll definitely see what his playability is and what his other uses are in other teams. But also, obviously, I do want to just point out the last character that I want to talk about, which is going to be someone like, I want to talk about Chaska and Wanderer. Might be some pretty good characters just because they are good to maybe focus on having. They are 5-star DPSs. Chaska is going to like it a lot just because 2 Natlan characters, probably going to help each other trigger Night Soul Bursts because that's elemental damage. So for Natlan characters, so I think overall that's something to kind of focus on. Also, she'll like that because she wants non-Animo in her team, so that's good. And then Wanderer just likes lots of reactions happening. Getting some extra characters in, different things can help him in his state as well. So I think there's a lot to go off with there in those teams, at least for those 2 characters as well. Well, that's everything we've got talking about Auroran. If you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Check out our Discord as well. If you guys have any other ideas or thoughts or comments about Auroran here, any other teams he might be good in, characters, maybe your thoughts on his kit, let us know down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.